No top officials, and I mean top officials, like the Queen, princes, princesses, presidents, prime ministers, not even one dictator, has proven COVID-19 exists in any of the victims. There has never been purification, isolation, and definition of biochemical properties, nor any electron micrographs. Nothing has been demonstrably justified, and they therefore acted privately in the fear-mongering. They acted outside statutory authority and are privately liable. They never brought documentation of proof and must not be allowed to bring any proof to this point because it could be fake. As well, not one lieutenant governor, premier governor, attorney general, solicitor general, top health officials, mayors, health departments, chief of police, etc., 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 have demonstrably justified anything. It was all fear-based and word of mouth, nothing legal or lawful or evidence-based. Nothing has been proven, nor is it provable. Hello, everyone. My name is Raphael O'Neill, commonly known as Nola Butterfly on the internet. Today, I would like to invite all to an open discussion towards action about the lockdown that is going on now. I want to give you a heads up on this discussion. It is very detailed and requires an attention span, because you can take what is discussed and make our world joyous again. I also want to state my pledge of allegiance as follows. I pledge allegiance to my fellow man and the earth we live on, and I will do all in my power to pulverize corruption on behalf of my fellow man and the earth we live on, so help me God. There, I put that out first and foremost. So now, the discussion is about nothing has been demonstrably justified, and yet fear-mongering and isolation and economic loss are rampant. I have with me an associate. I will just call him ER for simplicity. He goes by executivereasoning.com. There, I just gave his website. So first I want to read a quote by the father of the current Prime Minister of Canada. Justin Trudeau is the current Prime Minister of Canada, and his dad, a former Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, wrote the following for the signing of the Constitution in 1982.
We must now establish the basic principles, the basic values, and beliefs which hold us together as Canadians, so that beyond our regional loyalties, there is a way of life and a system of values which makes us proud of the country that has given us such freedom and such immeasurable joy. This is by Pierre Elliott Trudeau.
Here's what is being destroyed in Canada. What is being destroyed is what is written as follows.
I'm a Canadian, a free Canadian, free to speak without fear, free to worship God in my own way, free to stand for what I think right, free to oppose what I believe wrong, free to choose those who govern my country. This heritage of freedom I pledge to uphold for myself and all mankind. This was written by John Diefenbaker, Prime Minister at the time, House of Commons debates, July 1, 1960.
Isn't this being destroyed everywhere? Again, I'm using Canada as an example only because a Canadian has brought this to my attention. And I think it's worth putting it out there so we can all use the ideas I'm presenting here and now and make our world joyous again. So, the current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, just trashed his dad's work. And I will explain this and more in the next number of minutes, so please pay close attention. ER has brought to my attention a portion of a post on Facebook, a post written by Amanda Vollmer, who is a highly educated person in Ontario, Canada. And Amanda Vollmer writes as follows. As stated, viruses, of which there are many descriptions because there are different actions, from somatids as toolbox for DNA or RNA repair created by the 16-stage pleomorphic particles in the blood, bacteriophages as shock proteins to preserve the bacterial DNA material when they die suddenly, caused by adding to petri dishes via preparation methods for PCR, polymerase chain reaction, acting as detergents to clean and remove toxins from the body, may accompany these processes in small amounts. People with immune deficiencies should take self-responsibility for their health instead of staying victims, expecting other people to protect them. However, viruses will only become prominent when all other processes have been largely killed due to environmental toxicity, pollution, chemical inundation, poor air quality, poor water quality, poor food quality, nutritional deficiencies, wrong combination or choice of foods, medical treatments such as antibiotics and medications. When a body has a high degree of toxicity, bacteria feeding upon that toxic dead matter and tissue will be poisoned to death. When the body is at such a point of systemic toxicity, where bacterial levels and all living microbes in the body have been diminished or killed due to the above reasons, the body will call upon the help of viruses to help cleanse itself. When the body cannot utilize milder methods such as a cold, usually bacterial, it will utilize the help of non-living protein solvents, which are known as viruses. I will show why this is the only logical answer. Viruses help consume and eliminate substances into small particles that could then be expelled via mucous membranes, out through the skin, or through the intestinal tract. Cells produce viruses when their tissues are so toxic that phagocytes, parasites, bacteria, and fungi cannot help cleanse, repair, and regenerate their tissues and fluids. Science states, incorrectly without proof, that viruses originate outside the body, then hijack the RNA or DNA of the cell, and then replicate whilst attacking cells indiscriminately. If this were true, viruses would replicate endlessly, eventually attacking all healthy cells, but they do not. We know that antibodies, a type of white blood cell, regulates the virus. There exists no video evidence of viruses hijacking cells, except for 3D renders and animation based on theory. You do not catch, quote unquote, viruses, but you can be injected with them, and this causes the process of elimination of said particles with symptoms, which is the bodily method to remove the wastes. Non-self entities, foreign bodies, must be rigorously removed by the body. She goes on to say, not contagious. Stop shaming people for not self-isolating. Their testing methods and science are beyond flawed, and they even admit it. She also says a German doctor just recently went into the house of someone where they all had tested positive for it. He tested all of their surfaces, everything in the house. They were looking for the COVID-19 and couldn't find it anywhere. It doesn't exist on the surfaces. It's ridiculous. Couldn't possibly exist on surfaces. It's immediately that the exosomes or that particle, that second it hits the air, it dissolves. It's done. It's over. You'll find it in waterways and oceans. You can find it in rivers where it can survive. You can find it in animals, all kinds of animals, because it's in your own particles. And that's the joke about strains, right? Oh, wait, it's mutated. It's mutated now. We got this strain. We got that strain. If you pull up the strain map of CV19, you know where it started? In China, all this kind of stuff. It's always going to be different depending on the area because everybody's a little bit different. They're saying it's mutating, but it's not. It's just that our individual cells are making it a little bit different because we're all a little bit different. And the 5G now, I think in China, was something special happened. Because I think they're on purpose culling the herd there and getting rid of a lot of people because they have a high population. So I think they turned on 5G. They had already incinerator pollution. They already had a lot of people on nutritional deficiency, and they just had vaccinated the population pretty heavily. So that's a recipe for disaster right there. Do flies come to garbage? Of course. But did flies make the garbage? No. But they'll break it down, and if you're inflamed to the max, you already got your own thing going on. You already got full of bacteria because they're in activity mode breaking down your wastes for you. When the body cannot utilize milder methods, such as a cold, usually bacterial, it will utilize the help of non-living protein solvents, which are known as viruses. This makes rational sense. Also, Dr. James Hildreth, MD, a former HIV researcher, says, a virus is fully an exosome in every sense of the word. What induces exosomes? Toxic substances, stress, fear, cancer, ionizing radiation, infection, injury, immune response, asthma, diseases, electromagnetic radiation. I'll stop reading Amanda Vollmer's information now and shift gears. So this bit of information basically says that you need to eat healthy and live clean pretty much all the time. ER noted to me that no health official of any city or province of Canada has come out telling people to eat natural and processed foods and to avoid processed foods. Even the Prime Minister and all provincial premiers have failed to support immune system strength and health. None really talk about a healthy lifestyle. They just talk fear, and without producing a single notarized, sworn, or verifiable case of the virus associated with a cause of harm to anyone. As well, not a single provincial health official has done that either. Nor has this happened here in the United States. And folks, it gets even worse. Let me explain what was explained to me by ER. Are they trying to trick us into injecting poison into our bloodstreams instead by way of vaccines? It seems like that could be on the agenda. I'll summarize it legally first, then expand into the relevant legal issues, so stay tuned and stay focused to what I'm about to say. ER refers to the Canadian Constitution Act of 1982, Sections 1, 2, 6, 7, 9, 12, 15, 26, 31, and 52 as well. All locations on Earth are similar, so I will detail one particular place on Earth, Canada, because my friend ER has given detailed information on Canada, and the rest of the world is similar. I also point out for those in Ontario, and each Canadian province has similar laws, but for Ontario, the Police Services Act, and in particular sections 1, 3, 4, 5, 13, 17, 41, 42, 43, 55, 80, 81, and 135 of the Police Services Act. As well, it is important to note the Canadian Bill of Rights, as well as the Human Rights Code. These are written laws to be enforced by police, and I'll get to that soon, so stay tuned. Also, we need to bring to the attention of all listeners a Supreme Court of Canada decision, Roncarelli versus Duplessis, 1959. It was a landmark constitutional decision of the Supreme Court of Canada where the court held that Maurice Duplessis, the actual premier of Quebec, had overstepped his authority by revoking the liquor license of a Jehovah's Witness. ER says we have a parallel situation here with current officials. They stepping outside of statutory authority, big time, and are privately liable. The Premier of Quebec, while he was in office, was held privately liable for acts done outside of his lawful authority. So, let me say this again. Violations against laws by the officials or the laws to protect us are as follows. The Canadian Constitution Act of 1982, Sections 1, 2, 6, 7, 9, 12, 15, 26, 31, and 52. The Police Services Act, and in particular, Sections 1, 3, 4, 5, 13, 17, 41, 42, 43, 55, 80, 81, and 135. The Canadian Bill of Rights, as well as the Human Rights Code, and a Supreme Court of Canada decision, Roncarelli versus Duplessis. Here we go, folks. Listen on. This is what ER brought to my attention. Pay close attention. Now, as I talk about Canada, it is very similar here in the US It's just that I have specific details from Canada that can be used as the foundation to clean our planet of corruption. So keep listening.
The rule of law is such a foundational principle of our legal system that it is enshrined in the preamble of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It is an abstract concept, not easily defined. It means that we are governed by laws, not by people. I'm going to say that again. We are governed by laws and not by people. And that we are equally subject to the law, regardless of our wealth and political power. This means that those putting us in a lockdown are in trouble, and we are going to discover how to make this backfire on them. So just listen on. Therefore, government action must not be arbitrary, but must be rooted in law. Every law has a purpose, and it must be applied according to that purpose and not to achieve extraneous objectives, such as punishing government and political opponents. Every public official may act under authority, only under authority, of a specific law and must not be arbitrary. This lockdown is for everyone and done so without demonstrable justification. I'm going to say that word again, demonstrable justification. Hearsay or opinion given about deaths and sicknesses is insufficient by any standard. No proof has been shown anywhere by officials. The rule of law may be hard to define precisely, but like obscenity laws, it is easy to recognize a case that violates it. In Canada, the rule of law found that its rooting in its footing in 1959 in the case of Roncarelli versus Duplessis. Maurice Duplessis was the actual premier of Quebec at the time when he acted improperly, while in his job as premier of the province of Quebec. It's interesting to note that this case happened a generation before the Canadian Charter of Rights and its preamble.
Keep listening, please, because this is going to lead up to something very powerful. Listen on.
Legislation does not confer an unlimited arbitrary power exercisable for any purpose, however capricious or irrelevant, regardless of the nature or purpose of the statute. Discretion necessarily implies good faith in the discharging of public duty. There is always a perspective within which a statute is intended to operate, and any clear departure from its lines or objects is just as objectionable as fraud or corruption.
Continuing on.
The act of Quebec Premier Maurice Duplessis, through the instrumentality of the Commission, brought about a breach of an implied public statutory duty toward Frank Roncarelli, a citizen. It was a gross abuse of legal power expressly intended to punish him for an act wholly irrelevant to the statute, a punishment which inflicted upon him, as it was intended to do, the destruction of his economic life as a restaurant keeper within the province. So this case was about a premier in office, which in the United States, that would be the equivalent of a governor, who acted outside of his duties, and the premier was privately liable for damages. Can you smell the damages from this lockdown? It's in the billions, if not trillions, and all affected can get those in power to be responsible for it. Listen on. The Canadian Prime Minister, all provincial premiers, all health authorities, all mayors, even Her Majesty, and especially the police, have breached their statutory authority and duty in a fundamental way. Similarly, where you live. It is a gross abuse of legal power, failing to properly discharge public duty by violating the fundamental laws of the land. They have abused and broken the rule of law, and I question if there was due process. They also violated Section 126 of the Canadian Criminal Code, disobeying a statute, years in jail. So that was a huge mouthful. Stay with me here. I'm going to be breaking this down to actionable resistance and remedy. And here's how we're going to fix this. Are you ready for the ride? Well, here we go. Many people have been talking about chemtrails, and this needs to stop right this very second. And I'm sure There's a lot less going on now, but they're still going on. And we need all of us, including myself, to somehow step it up a notch to end chemtrails as soon as possible. And so now I continue. People are sick from the junk food and terrible lifestyles that ruin one's immune system. The focus needs to be to strengthen immune systems with food, not toxins. So from the beginning of this lockdown to this very moment, there has never been a verifiable case of someone sick due to the fear-mongering reasons stated. Not one certified, sworn under oath, and presented to the public at large and verifiable by anyone. Demonstrably means to show in a way that is clearly apparent. So not one official, not a prime minister, a president, a governor, a lieutenant governor, the queen, anybody has demonstrably justified anything. So it is now too late to show this so-called verifiable documentation, as it should never be believed if it is now presented, because the people in power really ought to know better. It must have already been demonstrably justified. There's that word again, demonstrably justified, like weeks ago or months ago. Let me repeat that. It's now too late to show this so-called documentation, as it should never be believed, because the people in power ought to know better. It must already have been demonstrably justified, and weeks ago with sworn, certified, easily verifiable proof, which has never happened.
According to ER, this brings us to Section 1 of the Canadian Constitution Act of 1982, Part 1, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which starts like this.
Whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law, and now Section 1 states, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. Section 1 states that in order for a charter right to be lawfully limited, the limit must be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. This basically means that limiting someone's charter rights must be reasonable in that it must seek to address an issue of pressing or substantial concern, done in a legal or lawful manner, and that it cannot have a disproportionate impact or effect. Demonstrably justified means that the burden of proof, which has never been shown by anybody yet, no documentation, no scans, nothing. Demonstrably justified means that the burden of proof is on the government to prove that the limits it has imposed are reasonable. In court, this would mean that once a plaintiff proves on balance of probabilities that his or her rights have been violated, the government must prove on balance of probabilities that it is reasonable. The benefit of the limit must be greater than the harm caused by limiting the right or freedom. We can clearly see that the harm caused is in the billions, if not trillions, and to innocent people.
Proof? We see videos of empty test centers, lies about death, lies about illness, and not one verified case sworn to the public.
Without the proof, it's arbitrary. Nothing right from the beginning of this lockdown has been demonstrably justified. Therefore, there are no cases. There is no risk as fear-mongered. Nothing verifiable, period. End of sentence. No proof. Nothing demonstrably justified at all. No proof, just fear-mongering words, an inhumane act on a civilian population. Yes, people are sick and people do die, but the authorities have failed to demonstrably justify anything. Instead, they use fear, emotions, and hearsay as evidence or fact. Feelings are not facts, and feelings are not evidence. This is a narcissistic abuse on a civilian population. So, nothing has been demonstrably justified. Yet we have lost what? What have we lost? And now I read Section 2 of the Constitution Act 1982. Everyone has the following fundamental freedoms. A, freedom of conscience and religion. B, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication. C, freedom of peaceful assembly. Did you hear that? Freedom of peaceful assembly. And D, freedom of association. We have lost the freedom of assembly, and we lost it without it being demonstrably justified as per Section 1 of the Canadian Constitution. So I just want to read something out of order here very quickly. Section 52 of this same Canadian Constitution states, "The Constitution of Canada is the supreme law of Canada, and any law that is inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution is, to the extent of the inconsistency, of no force or effect." All of the systems people have acted outside of statutory authority and are privately liable for all damages they have caused with the fear-mongering. If new laws are created, they are created with no force or effect, and we must ignore them and do all in our power to rid this earth of corruption. And today,
So instead of promoting immune system health through a healthy lifestyle, they produce fear, lockdown, damages in so many ways. And I ask each person who is able to hold them privately liable because they acted outside of statutory authority.
so let's talk about the Police Services Act in Ontario. I'm sure it's similar pretty much everywhere else. So the Police Services Act, Declaration of Principles. Section 1, police services shall be provided throughout Ontario in accordance with the following principles. 1, the need to ensure the safety and security of all persons and property in Ontario. And 2, listen very carefully. This is in the Police Services Act, Section 1, subsection 2. The importance of safeguarding the fundamental rights guaranteed by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Human Rights Code. Okay, the importance of safeguarding the fundamental rights guaranteed by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Human Rights Code. This is the police's job. Subsection 3, the need for cooperation between the providers of police services and the communities they serve. The importance of respect for victims of crime and understanding of their needs. 5, the need for sensitivity to the pluralistic, multiracial, and multicultural character of the Ontario society. And subsection 6, the need to ensure that police forces are representative of the communities they serve. So the totality of responsibility lays on the police. Yes, the police. And another person, the Solicitor General. Again, in the Police Services Act, Solicitor General, Administration of Act, Section 3, subsection 2. The Solicitor General shall, A, monitor police forces to ensure that adequate and effective police services are provided at the municipal and provincial levels. B, monitor boards and police forces to ensure that they comply with prescribed standards of service or standards established under the Police Record Checks Reform Acts 2015. D, develop and promote programs to enhance professional police practices, standards, and training. E, conduct the system of inspection and review of police forces across Ontario. F, assist in the cooperation of police services.
Where the F is a Solicitor General? Sleeping?
Now let's get back to the Police Services Act. Section 4, subsection 1. Every municipality to which this subsection applies shall provide adequate and effective police services in accordance with its needs. Core police services, subsection 2. Adequate and effective police services must include, at a minimum, and all of the following police services. 1, crime prevention. 2, law enforcement. 3, assistance to victims of crime. 4, public order maintenance. 5, emergency response. Subsection 3, in providing adequate and effective police services, a municipality shall be responsible for providing all the infrastructure and administration necessary for providing such services, including vehicles, boats, equipment, communication devices, buildings, and supplies. If a municipality fails to provide police services, then Section 5.1, subsection 1, If a municipality does not provide police services by one of the ways set out in Section 5, the Ontario Provincial Police, commonly known as the OPP, shall provide police services to the municipality. Since the police are not doing their jobs, the OPP must do it, but they too are absent. And now another person is in the picture who is also absent, the Lieutenant Governor. Okay, back to the Police Services Act, Ontario, Section 13, subsection 1. If because of the establishment of a business or for any other reason, special circumstances or abnormal conditions in an area make it inequitable, in the Solicitor General's opinion, to impose the responsibility for police services on a municipality or on the province, the Lieutenant Governor and Council may designate the area as a special area. Subsection 2, the person who operates the business or owns the special area, which would be the province, shall enter into an agreement with the Solicitor General for the province of police services by the Ontario Provincial Police for that special area. Now, there's another person in the Police Services Act, the Commissioner of the Ontario Provincial Police. Section 17, subsection 1, there shall be a Commissioner of the Ontario Provincial Police who shall be appointed by the Lieutenant Governor and Council. The functions, subsection 2, subject to the Solicitor General's direction. The Commissioner has the general control and administration of the Ontario Provincial Police and the employees connected with it.
Are these so-called employees dumbed down too? Keep listening.
Part 4, Police Services Act, police officers and other police staff. Duties of Chief of Police, Section 41, subsection 1. The duties of a Chief of Police include A, in the case of a municipal police force, administering the police force and overseeing its operation in accordance with the objectives, priorities, and policies established by the board under Section 31.1. B, ensuring that members of the police force carry out their duties in accordance with this act and the regulations and in a manner that reflects the needs of the community and that discipline is maintained in the police force. C, ensuring that police force provides community-oriented police services, and D, administering the complaint system in accordance with Part 5. The power to disclose personal information, subsection 1.1 of Section 41. Despite any other act, a chief of police or a person designated by him or her for the purpose of this subsection may disclose personal information about an individual in accordance with the regulations. The purpose of disclosure, subsection 1.2. Any disclosure made under Section 1.1 shall be for one or more of the following reasons. 1, protection of the public. 2, protection of victims of crime. 3, keeping victims of crime informed of the law enforcement, judicial and correctional processes relevant to the crime that affected them. 4, law enforcement. 5, correctional purposes. 6, administration of justice. 7, enforcement of and compliance with any federal or provincial act, regulation, or government program. 8, keeping the public informed of the law enforcement, judicial, or correctional processes respecting any individual. So now let's talk about the duties of a police officer. Duties of a police officer, Section 42 of the Police Services Act, subsection 1. The duties of a police officer include A, preserving the peace, B, preventing crimes and other offenses and providing assistance and encouragement to other persons in their prevention, C, assisting victims of crime, D, apprehending criminals and other offenders and others who may lawfully be taken into custody, E, laying charges and participating in prosecutions, F, executing warrants that are to be executed by police officers and performing other related duties, G, performing the lawful duties that the chief of police assigns, H, in the case of a municipal police force and in the case of an arrangement under Section 10, agreement for provision of police services by the OPP, enforcing municipal laws, and I, completing the prescribed training. The power to act throughout Ontario. A police officer has the authority to act as such throughout Ontario. That's Section 42, subsection 2. And subsection 3 states a police officer has the powers and duties ascribed to a constable at common law. This means that a police officer does not need permission from anyone to act. I have mentioned just a few minutes ago the violations of law, and I read that the police are to safeguard the fundamental rights guaranteed by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Human Rights Code, Section 1 of the Police Services Act. Here's more of the Police Services Act. Criteria for hiring police officers. Section 43, subsection 1. No person shall be appointed as a police officer unless he or she, A, is a Canadian citizen or permanent resident in Canada, B, is at least 18 years of age, C, and I'm going to repeat this, is physically and mentally able to perform the duties of the position, having regard to his or her own safety and the safety of the members of the public. I'm going to say that again. That's Section 43, subsection C, for criteria for hiring a police officer. That they are physically and mentally able to perform the duties of the position, having regard to his or her own safety and the safety of the members of the public. D, and I'm going to repeat this one a second time too, is of good moral character and habits. I'm going to say that one again, is of good moral and character habits. And E, has successfully completed at least 4 years of secondary school education or its equivalent. So did you hear that? Is physically and mentally able to perform the duties of the position, having regard to his or her own safety and the safety of the members of the public, and successfully completed at least 4 years of secondary school education or its equivalent.
Doesn't it seem like they're not qualified to be police officers, or are they refusing to do their jobs? Are police withholding services?
Well, carrying on here, under the Police Services Act, emergencies, Section 55, subsection 1, in an emergency, the Solicitor General may make an agreement with the Crown and Right of Canada or of another province or with any of its agencies for the provision of police services. But let's get to withholding of the services. Misconduct, Section 80 of the Police Services Act, subsection 1. A police officer is guilty of misconduct if he or she, and I'm just going to read F, subsection F, contravenes Section 81, which is inducing misconduct, withholding services.
Didn't I just suggest they were withholding services?
Well, police are in violation of Section 80 of the Police Services Act. I'm going to say that again. Police are in violation of Section 80 of the Police Services Act. This is failing to obey a statute, which is a criminal code violation, Section 126 of the Canadian Criminal Code, which is jail time. Are cops criminals? I say many of them are, and by statute, I would say they all are. So here's more. Section 81 of the Police Services Act, inducing misconduct and withholding services. Section 81, subsection 1. No person shall A, induce or attempt to induce a member of a police force to withhold his or her services, or B, induce or attempt to induce a police officer to commit misconduct. And subsection 2 of Section 81, withholding services, no member of a police force shall withhold his or her services. Subsection 3 of Section 81 of the Police Services Act, a person who contravenes subsection 1 or 2 is guilty of an offense and on conviction is liable to a fine of not more than $2,000 or imprisonment for a term of not more than 1 year or both. But that they also failed to obey a statute, which is Canadian Criminal Code Section 126, which is jail time.
Is someone preventing police from doing their job, or is there someone protecting them from not doing their job? Like the Solicitor General, as just mentioned.
Well, Section 135, subsection 1, the Lieutenant Governor and Council may make regulations, 1, prescribing standards for police services, and 1.1, establishing and governing the standards concerning the adequacy and effectiveness of police services, including prescribing methods for monitoring and evaluating the adequacy and effectiveness of police services against such standards. So after all of this, let's look at the Constitution that they have failed to uphold, for which they have a duty to uphold. And this is some of the things I'm just going to read regarding the Constitution.
Are the borders closed?
Yes, they are.
Is livelihood stopped?
Yes, it is. And so let's get to the Canadian Constitution, Section 6, Mobility of Citizens. Subsection 1, every citizen of Canada has the right to enter remain in and leave Canada. Not anymore. Subsection 2. Every citizen of Canada and every person who has the status of a permanent resident of Canada has the right to A, move to and take up residence in any province, and B, to pursue the gaining of a livelihood in any province. Has proper due process happened, meaning court order with notarized sworn information used to affect freedoms? No, far from it. Legal rights, life, liberty, and security of the person, Section 7 of the Constitution Act. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the security of the person, and the right not to be deprived of thereof, except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice.
Are people basically imprisoned in their homes, even if they're healthy and vibrant, and especially since no demonstrably justified reasons have been disclosed?
Well, the Constitution, Section 9, talks about this. Everyone has the right not to be arbitrarily detained or imprisoned.
Is fear-mongering without evidence cruel treatment?
Yes, it is. The Constitution Act, Section 12, everyone has the right not to be subjected to any cruel and unusual treatment or punishment.
Is there any protection from this cruelty just mentioned? Protection and benefits of the law?
Well, equality rights under the Constitution, equality before and under the law, and equal protection and benefit of the law, Section 15 of the Constitution Act, subsection 1. Every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination, and in particular without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, etc., etc.
Weren't we all born free?
Yes, we were. The Canadian Constitution, Section 26. The guarantee in this charter of certain rights and freedoms shall not be construed as denying the existence of any other rights or freedoms that exist in Canada.
Are corrupt political figures making up their own laws?
It seems so. The Canadian Constitution, Section 31, nothing in this charter extends the legislative powers of anybody or authority.
Are people in power even reading this?
Yes, and that would be Section 52 of the Constitution Act, the primacy of the Constitution of Canada. Section 52, subsection 1. The Constitution of Canada is the supreme law of Canada. And any law that is inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution is, to the extent of the inconsistency, of no force or effect.
And what about human rights?
The Canadian Human Rights Act, purpose of the Act, Section 2. The purpose of this Act is to extend the laws of Canada to give effect, within the purview of matters coming within the legislative authority of Parliament, to the principle that all individuals should have an opportunity equal with other individuals to make for themselves the lives that they are able and wish to have, and to have their needs accommodated, etc., etc., etc.
And what about the Human Rights Code?
Well, the Human Rights Code, Ontario, preamble, whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. And where it is public policy in Ontario to recognize the dignity and worth of every person and to provide for equal rights and opportunities without discrimination that is contrary to law, and having as its aim the creation of a climate of understanding and mutual respect for the dignity and worth of each person, so that each person feels a part of the community and able to contribute fully to the development and well-being of the community and the province. And whereas these principles have been confirmed in Ontario by a number of enactments of the legislature, and is desirable to revise and extend the protection of human rights in Ontario, therefore Her Majesty, there's Her Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Legislative Assembly of the Province of Ontario, enacts as follows. Part 1, freedom from discrimination. Section 1, every person has a right to equal treatment with respect to services, goods, and facilities without discrimination, etc., etc., etc.
What equality is there when healthy people with their own thoughts and beliefs cannot act freely, especially without the demonstrably justified disclosure that was never disclosed, and with corrupt people in power creating fear and panic?
Well, as a final law here, and this involves the federal police called the RCMP, Section 18, duties of the RCMP. It is the duty of members who are peace officers subject to the orders of the commissioner, A, to perform all duties that are assigned to peace officers in relation to the preservation of the peace, the prevention of crime, and of offenses against the laws of Canada and the laws in force in any province in which they may be employed, and the apprehension of criminals and offenders and others who may be lawfully taken into custody.
The police have failed. The Solicitor General has failed. So has the Lieutenant Governor, premiers, health officials, Prime Minister, and so many more. That's just in Canada. What about everywhere else? So now, please use some of this and let's clean house and make our world joyous and make this live event backfire on them so as to pulverize it once and for all. So I've said more than a mouthful, and we need to take all of this information and do what we each individually can and pulverize the corruption starting right now. I say, make this backfire on them. Go, people. Go. Make this backfire on them. Thank you and God bless. I'm Raphael from New Orleans. Let's fix our world together.